You were smiling when you started off. And today we want to talk about how to give good feedback.
Everyone, it's Kayleigh and Immanuel here. It's great to have you, and we want to know that you're loved and that there's a purpose for your life.
And today we want to talk about how to give good feedback. And I think the first thing is when you're using extreme words to describe something, like you never listen to me, you never do this, you always do this. It's not true.
It's quite unlikely that someone has never listened to you.
Yeah.
So it's just inaccurate, which then makes it harder to actually have a conversation when you sound unreasonable. Yeah.
The feedback that is really harmful is when you actually bring something up in a state where either one or both of you are highly emotional. For example, when you're both really tired, maybe it's like really late, and to have a conversation where you give each other feedback, you need to have a clear mind. You need to really be also able to talk rationally. And so when you are really tired, you can easily say things that you will regret later.
And another thing is telling someone that they made you feel a certain way, when actually it's their actions or a certain set of events that resulted in you feeling a certain way. And it could seem like a small difference, but when you pin your emotions on being the responsibility or result of someone else, it's very not confrontational, not aggressive.
Invasive.
Yeah, it's very invasive.
Maybe we can let you in on something that someone has provoked us with. He was saying no one ever made you angry. And that was
and no
wow.
one can ever make you
And
angry.
no one can ever make you angry. But it's something where you allow yourself to be angry because of something that happens to you. And so when you actually realize, actually, I am in control of my emotions, wow, that's a game changer.
Yeah. And I mean, that's not to say that you should make the choice to now never be angry again, because sometimes there's a need to have that emotion. But yeah, definitely being aware that it is your responsibility helps in a conversation and helps with giving and receiving feedback.
Yeah, totally.
And then the last thing you should avoid is having a closed mind going into a conversation where you give feedback. That's never helpful. Shouldn't say never. It's usually not helpful to have a closed mind about the outcome, because you might not get the outcome you expected. Maybe you learn something new in that conversation, or the person you're talking to doesn't understand or doesn't want to. You can't control the outcome, so it's not helpful to predetermine what that should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was it like in our context then?
Yeah, so we have certainly had some chances to give feedback to each other, and there's one time that came to mind for us, which was when Immanuel had some feedback for me, which was actually that I wasn't good at receiving feedback.
I basically sat you down to say, look, I feel like you're not really good at receiving feedback.
Yeah. You said that when you give me feedback, I become defensive. And initially, it's difficult to receive feedback about how you receive feedback, because you're thinking, well, I want to be good at it. So yeah, let me listen, let me acknowledge it. And I didn't fully express myself. I mean, I really wanted to do the right thing, and I wanted Immanuel to feel comfortable telling me whatever. So for a little while, maybe a few weeks, if things did come up where you gave me feedback, I would kind of then be quiet or receive it and then think about it in my own head. You know, not necessarily agree, but listen and think about it, which isn't a bad thing. But I quite quickly realized something was missing for me, because sometimes there was more to it than what you realized, and I didn't feel like I could share my side of the story without being perceived as being defensive. Yeah. So then the thing that I was soon asking for from Immanuel was, okay, if you give me feedback, what would really help me is if you also ask me for my opinion on whatever you just highlighted, so that way I don't feel like I have to force my side of the story on you, and I don't have to now claim that I'm not being defensive. You know, it's like, give me an avenue to say my part, basically. Yeah.
And I think this is a very good lead up to a very useful and quite comprehensive concept that we learned at our time at Bible school. It's an acronym called STATE, and STATE stands for S for start with the facts. So when you go into a conversation where you share feedback, you first start with the facts, you lay them out, this is what happened, and then with a T, you tell your own story. So with the facts that you have just outlined, you say what happened, how it affected you, how it made you feel. And then the A in the state is to ask for their path. And this is where I at first fell short quite often, when I didn't really ask for her opinion on that, for me to have a better perspective, because it's always coming from my own perspective, and I feel like I have the best perspective and the most rounded opinion on everything, of course, but once she shares hers, and she also has a perspective that I have to take seriously.
Yeah, he realizes he's not perfect, but that I'm right.
So that helps. Yeah. The T in state, the second T, is to talk tentatively. And this refers back to what we said, don't ever talk in extremes. I just did. Where you really try to avoid using this kind of language that is really toxic. The last letter in state is E, which says encourage testing. So this is then when, once you have outlined what you want to say, you say, am I seeing this wrong? Am I misunderstanding you? Or what are your thoughts on this? And so this is where you then can really encourage a conversation that is basically aimed to go towards a shared understanding.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, so not only is this STATE acronym really useful to understand how to give and receive good feedback, but if you do have a relationship where you're quite close with someone and you do have the chance to look at states and, you know, agree with each other how you want to approach giving and receiving feedback, it does mean that when those times come, both parties are prepared. When the one with the problem or the topic to bring up starts talking, the person receiving the feedback knows their time is coming to give their side of the story, and it frees up both people to really listen to each other, you know, knowing that they're on the same page and they're both working together to resolve it.
Very good. And in general, I believe that giving good feedback is extremely powerful. It has so much potential for, in whatever context you relate to another person. When you do it right, you can really get so much deeper, understand so much better, and also be understood so much better.
Yeah, and we totally get that it can be really uncomfortable in starting these conversations. So we know it's not always easy to have conversations like this, and actually we did address that fear of difficult topics in our hedgehog versus rhino video, so we can link that down below. But yeah, that's all for today's video, and if you have an example of a really good experience giving feedback or a really bad experience giving feedback, let us know in the comments. It's always really interesting to hear from you guys, and please do subscribe and hit the like button on our video as well, as it would help us out a ton, and we'll say thank you. So thank you.
Great to have you.
See you.
See you next time. Bye.